There's a few things I just wanted to point out. First of all, some of the language that gets used in these kinds of dialogue, some language that you used in particular, makes me a little bit concerned. One, the buffalo did not vanish. They were systematically wiped out in order to substitute. It's very important that you learn the history of the people. Consult with the First Nations people so that you get a better idea of where exactly we're coming from. So people like my fellow Blackfoot sister here, Celeste comes to speak, get an idea of where she's coming from. Second of all, when we're talking about one of the issues, you mentioned something about in 1968 when you first came into Canada. There were very few First Nations people in universities. That's true. There's a reason behind that. Many of us were still on the reserve, still in residential schools. I bet you if I was to ask the people in this room, the First Nations people, how many of you are residential school survivors, they can stand up. How many of you are children of residential school survivors? They will stand up. How many of you are grandchildren of residential school survivors? They will stand up. Everybody in this room will stand up. And the reason why we weren't in universities back then was because many of our children were being tortured, raped, abused in those residential schools. So then we're expected to come out of those schools, and we're expected to become like the rest of Canada, without special status, without special rights. We are expected to come out here and function when, as a child from the age of 3, you're put into school, you're told not to speak your language. There's stories of very remote communities in northern British Columbia who, and these were documented stories of survivors who, when they spoke their language, a pin was put through their tongue so they would not speak their language. So we come out of here and we're expected to be like the rest of Canada. And my dad said, who was a survivor of residential school, he said he was groomed perfectly for the jail system. He said the only difference between residential school and a jail is I didn't have to pray in jail. That was the reality, right? So, and then I guess just one last thing, you said, and I appreciate you saying this, you said, yes, there are changes that need to happen with the Indian Act. And we all agree with that. And you said you don't know how. Well, we do. Today, there are many educated people in our communities, and not just educated in the Western schools. I'm a PhD student, but I'm also a mother of 7, and I'm also a grandmother of 18 children. My responsibility to carry on the traditions and the languages of my ancestors. We know what needs to be done within our own communities. When I hear you speak, I feel as it's still coming from the outside in. It's still somebody else coming in, telling us how to fix ourselves, when the answers are right there within our communities. And all I guess what I'm asking you is to consider, just consider this thought. What if we already know the answers, but we just have not been given a voice in this country to share those with the rest of